What would you do if the very land your family built its legacy on, land passed down from your grandfather to your father to you, was stolen right out from under you by a group of smug suburban bureaucrats with clipboards and fake smiles? This isn't a story about tractors or wheat. It's a story about power, betrayal, and the high price of underestimating the wrong man. When the HOA of Oakwood Hills tried to illegally sell off Franklin Johnson's 1,500-acre family farm, they thought he'd roll over, sign a settlement, and disappear quietly. But they didn't know Frank. And they sure as hell didn't know what he was hiding in that old family safe. What followed was a war of documents, deceit, and delicious downfall, where a forgotten inheritance became a weapon, a forged signature triggered a legal firestorm, and one farmer turned the entire HOA into rubble. This is real. This is raw. This is real HOA drama. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in justice served cold, on a platter of soil, sweat, and strategy. Because in this town, the dirt talks. And it's got one hell of a story to tell. There's a certain kind of peace that only comes from watching the morning sun crawl over acres of golden wheat, the kind of peace that feels like home. That was my morning. Birds chirping, coffee steaming, my boots resting on the porch rail like they'd grown roots. I'd been farming this land since I could hold a shovel, and my father before me, and his father before him. This wasn't just soil. This was legacy. So when the phone rang, I figured it was Earl from down the road, needing help getting his tractor unstuck again. Or maybe it was Shirley from the feed store trying to get me to switch to her cousin's brand of chicken pellets. You know, the usual small-town noise. Instead, it was Sam Grayson, my lawyer, and one of the few people in town who still wore ties to breakfast. His voice was tight. Too tight. "Frank, we've got a problem. The HOA just filed papers saying they sold your land to a developer. All 1,500 acres. I nearly spilled coffee all over my boots. For a solid 3 seconds, I thought he was joking. Some weird lawyer humor about paperwork and property lines. But Sam didn't joke. Especially not before 9 a.m. "That's not possible," I said, standing up and staring out at my fields. "That land's been in my family since before Oakwood even had a zip code. I didn't sell a damn inch. You need to get to the county office. Now." 35 minutes later, I was standing in a cramped room that smelled like paper, mildew, and decades of poor decisions. Sam was already there, flipping through a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. His jaw was set, so tight you could have cracked walnuts on it. He slid the documents toward me. I stared. There it was. A sales agreement with my name on it. Stamped. Notarized. Filed. Signed. Only I'd never signed it. "Is this some kind of prank?" I muttered. Sam didn't answer. He just handed me the next page. My signature. It looked close. Damn close. But I knew my own hand, and that wasn't it. I felt something twist in my gut. Like the first time I saw my father cry, when Mom passed. That same helpless burn behind the ribs. "This is forged," I said, voice low. My hands tightened around the folder. "They forged a sale, and think they can get away with it?" Sam sighed, leaning back against the filing cabinet like the weight of the world had crawled into his briefcase. "Not only that," he said, "they already flipped it to a developer. Construction starts next month." It hit me like a punch, right in the chest. Concrete over the land where I'd learned to walk behind a plow. Bulldozers tearing up the fields where my grandfather taught me how to work cattle and chew sunflower seeds at the same time. This wasn't just property. This was blood. And someone with a clipboard and a god complex had tried to erase all of it. Who approved this? I demanded. Sam flipped to the final page, tapping it like a death sentence. Daniel Whitmore, HOA president. And the notary? His wife. Of course it was Daniel. That smug HOA kingpin who'd spent years sending me passive-aggressive letters about aesthetic harmony and the dust levels from my tractor. He thought I was some hick farmer too old to care, too dumb to fight. He was wrong. Dead wrong. "Get me everything," I said. "Every paper they filed. Every fake form they touched. If they want a war, they're about to get one." I walked out of that office with fire in my chest and dust on my boots. They had messed with the wrong man. And they were about to find out exactly how much hell a farmer can raise. The house was quiet when I got back. That kind of eerie, hollow quiet that only comes when something sacred has been violated. I didn't bother taking off my boots. I walked straight through the kitchen, past the old rocking chair Mom used to sit in, and headed for the back room. It smelled like cedar and memory in there. The safe hadn't been opened in years. Not since the day we buried Dad. I had promised myself I'd never need to. But as I spun the dial, 32 left, 15 right, 42 left, it was like I could feel his hand on my shoulder, steady as ever. The metal creaked open, and there it was, a stack of manila folders so old the corners had curled like burnt toast. Inside were land deeds, tax receipts from the 1950s, and notes scribbled in my father's unmistakably sloppy handwriting. He always wrote like he was racing against time, even when signing a birthday card. I sat on the floor, paper spread around me like fallen leaves. Somewhere deep in the pile, I found the deed to our 1,500 acres, stained with age, but stamped with legitimacy. I knew this land was ours, but I needed more. I needed anything that could burn Daniel Whitmore's little kingdom to the ground. Then I saw it. A folded slip of parchment tucked inside a plastic sleeve labeled Johnson Inheritance, 1964. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The ink had faded into sepia, but the words still cut clear. In addition to the primary acreage, 300 acres extending east of Pine Hollow are included in the transfer of ownership, effective immediately. I stopped breathing. Pine Hollow. That was the patch of dense trees just beyond the ridge, the line no one crossed, not even deer. And beyond that, Oakwood Hills. The very neighborhood where Daniel Whitmore and his HOA cronies sip lemonade on their matching porches and fine people for painting mailboxes the wrong shade of beige. I scrambled to the bookshelf, yanked out an old county map from the 70s, and laid it side by side with the modern zoning plat. I traced the boundaries with my finger, heart pounding like a war drum. They overlapped. The land the HOA had stolen from me? They'd built half their neighborhood on my family's inheritance. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Then I noticed something folded at the bottom of the envelope, paper soft as tissue, barely hanging on. It was a letter. My father's handwriting again. Familiar, stubborn, shaky. I read it slowly, like a prayer. Son, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. Our land, it's more than crops and fences. It's who we are. The world might forget, papers might get buried, but truth lives in the soil. If anyone ever tries to take this from you, don't just defend it, fight like hell. This land is our blood. Protect it. My throat tightened. I didn't cry. Dad would have called that wasting water. But I felt something crack open inside me. A fire that had smoldered too long. This wasn't just about forged documents anymore. This wasn't just a legal case. This was war. They hadn't just tried to steal my land. They'd built their little HOA empire on my family's bones. And now I had the proof. Ink faded with time, but legacy doesn't fade. It waits. Quietly. In safes and soil. In hearts that refuse to forget. And I was done forgetting. I'd always believed that if you wanted to find the truth, you had to get your hands dirty. Lucky for me, I was a farmer. Getting dirty was kind of my thing. After discovering the extra 300 acres, I didn't march down to the HOA office with torches and pitchforks, tempting as that was. No. This battle was going to be won with paper, patience, and the kind of quiet fury that creeps under floorboards and blows the roof off when no one expects it. Sam and I got to work. We dug deep into county records, zoning applications, HOA filings, anything with a date, stamp, or signature. Most of it was mind-numbingly dull. Bureaucracy always is. But somewhere in that haystack was the needle I needed to stab straight through Daniel Whitmore's smug little heart. And then, just when we were starting to lose hope, she called. Her voice was shaky, like someone who knew the line she was about to cross could burn bridges to the ground. Mr. Johnson? This is Linda Parker. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm the treasurer for the Oakwood Hills HOA. Oh, I remembered her. Always the quiet one at meetings, hiding behind big glasses and a bigger binder. I need to talk to you. Privately. We met at a diner off Route 12, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like burnt ambition and the waitresses call you Han, whether they like you or not. Linda slid into the booth across from me, eyes darting around like she expected Daniel to burst through the jukebox with a subpoena. She didn't order anything. Just pulled a flash drive out of her purse and set it between us like it was made of TNT. This is from a board meeting. For years ago. You need to hear it. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded. Daniel knew. He knew about the irregularity in the land title. A surveyor flagged it during the expansion planning. He told us to ignore it. Said, and I quote, "No one will notice, not until it's too late to matter." I blinked. He said that? On record. She nodded. I kept the recordings. In case this day came. Smart woman. She looked around the room one more time, lowered her voice. I've had enough of the lies, the power games. I joined the HOA to help my neighborhood, not become part of a con. Her hands trembled as she passed over the flash drive. Do what you have to do. Just don't tell them it came from me. Not yet. That night, Sam and I sat in his office, the room lit only by the glow of his monitor and the buzz of righteous fury. We hit play. The audio crackled, but the voices were clear. Daniel's voice, oily and arrogant, came through like a villain from a daytime soap. The lot lines technically cross old farmland, but who's gonna check some dusty deed from 60 years ago? Just move forward. If there's fallout, the lawyers will deal with it. Sam paused the audio, turned to me slowly. Well, Frank, I think we just found our smoking gun. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy picturing Daniel's face when this came out, how that confident little smirk would melt into pure panic. HOA had buried the truth. But one of their own had just handed me the shovel. The war was no longer about if I could win. Now it was just a matter of when to pull the trigger. And, I was going to enjoy the fireworks. There's a strange kind of power in pretending to be weak. People drop their guard. They say too much. They laugh a little louder than they should, because they think they've already won. And I was counting on that. I knew Daniel Whitmore. The man didn't just love power, he needed it. Like oxygen. Like bad cologne. And nothing would feed his ego more than watching me, Franklin Johnson, the dusty old farmer with boots older than his entire HOA, squirm under pressure. So I gave him exactly what he wanted. I started showing up at HOA meetings looking like hell. Mud on my jeans, hair a mess, documents poking out of a crumpled folder like they'd been through a tornado. I made a scene, raised my voice, threw out words like legacy and theft and family farm. The room would go quiet. Then Daniel would clear his throat, flash that polished smile like a used car salesman, and say things like, "Mr. Johnson, we've reviewed your claims again. And once again, we find no merit in them. Perhaps you should speak with your attorney, assuming you still have one." The board would chuckle. I'd fume. I'd storm out. And then I'd go home and laugh my damn head off. Because while they thought I was unraveling, I was filing an airtight land ownership claim with the county registrar. Quietly. Efficiently. No press. No drama. No grandstanding. Just one signature, one notarized packet, and one ticking legal time bomb. Sam and I didn't stop there. We marked every boundary, updated every survey, cross-referenced every plat from 1960 to now. The 300-acre parcel? Now officially flagged under my name. But no one knew it yet, not Daniel, not the board, not even the county clerk who'd taken the filing thought twice. I let the HOA keep playing emperor. They sent me 3 more violation notices that month, one for excessive dust, one for non-compliant fencing, and my personal favorite, one for having livestock too close to the property line. Livestock. On my land. That they'd illegally built a cul-de-sac next to. I pinned all 3 notices to my fridge with a chicken-shaped magnet and smiled every time I got milk. Because the longer I played the fool, the deeper they dug their own grave. The HOA was holding hands with a developer, giddy about pouring concrete over stolen soil, while I was holding the real deed to their kingdom. They thought I was just trying to save a few acres. They had no idea I was about to pull the ground out from under their homes. At the next HOA meeting, I stood up during open comments and said, "I know this all seems hopeless. Maybe I should just give up. Maybe this land don't mean what it used to. Maybe I'll win." Daniel smirked so hard I thought his face might crack in half. Good. Let him enjoy it. Let the board pop champagne over their victory. Because while they were laughing, I was waiting. Watching. Lining up the last few chess pieces before I tipped the board over. This wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And when the dust settled, they wouldn't even know what hit them. It started with envelopes. Plain white, government-issued, no-nonsense envelopes that showed up like ghosts in mailboxes across Oakwood Hills. Inside each one was a polite little apocalypse, a legal notice stating that their home, their backyard barbecue dreams, their white picket fence lives were all sitting on disputed property. My property. The reaction was predictable. Denial first. Then panic. By the second afternoon, the HOA office was swamped with calls. The board members were ducking behind blinds. Real estate agents were backing out of deals like rats off a sinking ship. I sat on my porch, sipping iced tea, watching the wind bend through my wheat. And for the first time in a long time, I felt quiet justice settle in my chest. The first one to come knocking was Marjorie Lewis, a retired librarian with white hair, a walker, and the kind of floral dress that made her look like she'd just stepped out of a 1950s garden party. She stood at the edge of my driveway, wringing her hands like she was squeezing guilt out of her skin. "Mr. Johnson," she said, voice trembling. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the house was built on someone else's land." I looked her in the eyes. There was something fragile there, something real. But then I remembered. 2 years ago, it was her signature on one of the HOA complaints. About my tractor. About the dust. About how it ruined the aesthetic harmony of their neighborhood. She never once came to talk to me. Never asked about my family. Never cared that I'd lived here since before her developer-built ranch house was even a blueprint. Now she was crying. "Please," she whispered. "I'm too old to move again." I didn't answer. I just tipped my hat and walked back inside. Then came Thomas Grant. Young dad. 3 kids. 1 mortgage. Sweat on his collar and desperation in his voice. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "I get it. You're angry. You have every right. But my boys, they were born in that house. If there's any way, any deal, I can make with you to stay, I'll do it." He meant it. I could see it in the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching, like he was trying to hold onto something that had already slipped through. But I remembered the day he stood up at an HOA meeting, nodding along while Daniel called me a public nuisance. I remembered the way he laughed when someone joked about paving over my wheat fields to build a golf course. "I begged them once," I told him. "Begged them to stop fining me for dust. For fencing too rustic. For having a barn too red. They didn't listen. Not once." He looked at the ground. "Now," I said, voice steady, "they're going to be treated the same way they treated me." I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for balance. For every time I got a violation notice instead of a neighborly knock, for every eye roll, every HOA letter with my name misspelled, every time they called me the problem. They didn't care about the land. They cared about control. And they'd lost it. This wasn't vengeance. This was gravity. And Oakwood Hills was finally learning how it felt to fall. There's a moment in every fight when your enemy realizes they might lose. That's when things get real ugly. Not smart, ugly. And the Oakwood Hills HOA? They weren't smart to begin with. They didn't respond to my land claim with lawyers. No, Daniel Whitmore and his desperate little board went full high school drama. If they couldn't beat me in court, they'd try to break me in public. It started with flyers. Black and white printouts stuffed in every mailbox in the neighborhood, all anonymous, though it didn't take a genius to know who printed them. The font screamed, Microsoft Word in a hurry. The tone was vintage Daniel, condescending with just the right touch of fake concern. "Warning, Local landowner seeks to dismantle our community for personal gain. Franklin Johnson is attempting to seize your home. Protect your neighborhood. Stand against greed. Greed? I drive a pickup older than most of their children. My idea of luxury is air conditioning that works on the first try. But sure, let's call me the villain here. The next stunt? A freshly posted sign right at the border of my wheat fields. Big, bold letters. Future site of Oakwood Hills expansion. Coming soon. Right on my land. I stared at it for a good 5 minutes before I started laughing. They'd just declared war. On paper. In public. And without legal ground to stand on. Then came the real gut punch. I woke up one morning, poured my coffee, stepped outside, and found my entire eastern fence line torn down.
Gone.
Ripped clean. Nothing but splintered posts and tire tracks. No cows loose. Thank God, but still, that fence had been there for 3 generations. Built by my grandfather, repaired by my father, and patched more times than I could count.
Now?
Flattened. Like it never existed. I didn't curse. I didn't scream. I took 3 photos. Wide angle. Time-stamped. Then I texted Sam. They just broke my fence and posted a fake development sign. That's criminal trespass, destruction of private property, and misrepresentation of land use. You ready? His reply came fast. Let's bury them. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I knew exactly what they'd just done. They hadn't just crossed the line. They dug their own legal grave and jumped in headfirst. You see, there's a funny thing about real estate law. When someone posts false signage on land they don't own, that's a civil violation. When they destroy property to do it, that's criminal. And when they do both on land under legal dispute, that's intent to defraud, which, in court, is like walking into a firing squad in a clown suit. The HOA thought I was bluffing, that I was just an angry old farmer lashing out. What they didn't know was that every move they made gave me more evidence, more leverage, more power. They were playing dirty. I was playing smart. And the difference? I'd win. Because when you mess with a man's land, you better make damn sure he doesn't have receipts. And I had a whole filing cabinet full of them. There are few things more satisfying than watching a liar squirm under oath, especially when that liar once tried to bulldoze your family's legacy into a strip mall. The courthouse was packed, shoulder to shoulder. Locals, reporters, realtors with sweat-stained collars, nervous homeowners clutching mortgage documents like life preservers. And smack in the middle of it all sat Daniel Whitmore, in a suit too expensive for a man so obviously falling apart. I walked in wearing my best boots and cleanest flannel. Not to impress anyone, just to remind them who really belonged here. Sam and I sat at the plaintiff's table.
Calm.
Focused. We had the deed, the inheritance records, the zoning maps, the audio files from Linda, the photo evidence of my fence, the false signage, the forged signatures. Honestly, we didn't have a legal case. We had a tsunami. The HOA's lawyer tried. I'll give him that. He stammered about good faith, clerical oversights, and community interest. But every word just dug them deeper. Then came the judge. A stern woman with reading glasses low on her nose and zero tolerance for BS. She flipped through the files with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a major operation. No smiles. No glances. Just page after page of brutal truth. Finally, she looked up. The room went still. This court finds that the Oakwood Hills Homeowners Association, she began, knowingly and fraudulently transferred property they did not legally own. The land in question, both the 1,500 acres and the additional 300 inherited acres, rightfully belonged to the plaintiff, Franklin Johnson.
A gasp.
Then murmurs. Then rising panic. Daniel stared at her like she'd just announced Gravity was being canceled. But she wasn't finished. Furthermore, all developments, structures, and private residences built upon the 300-acre inheritance zone are deemed to be in violation of property law. Their continued presence shall be subject to the discretion of the legal landowner. There it was.
The bomb.
A woman in the gallery dropped her phone. A man next to her whispered, "Oh my God." And Daniel?
He didn't speak.
He didn't blink. His jaw just unhinged, like the weight of the verdict had pulled his entire ego straight down to hell. I stood up slowly, let the silence stretch. I turned toward the crowd, neighbors, board members, families who once called me the problem for daring to plow a field next to their yoga lawn. You all thought I was just a stubborn old farmer, I said, my voice carrying like thunder on a summer night. But I'm not the one who built a neighborhood on stolen land. You try to push me off the very ground my father died defending.
And now?
Now I hold the keys to your homes. I could feel the shift in the room.
Fear.
Anger.
Shame.
All the smugness?
Gone.
Replaced by the gut-punch realization that they were no longer in control. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. I didn't stop. I had no speech to give. The verdict had spoken louder than I ever could. But as I walked down the courthouse steps, I passed Daniel sitting on a bench, head in his hands, suit wrinkled, future in flames. I didn't say a word, because justice doesn't need a mic drop. It just needs a good judge and a man too stubborn to give up his land. Eviction notices don't care about your HOA title, your perfectly manicured lawn, or how many matching Adirondack chairs you have on the porch. They just show up, folded and certified, signed by the rightful landowner, me. By Monday morning, every resident on the 300-acre inheritance parcel of Oakwood Hills had a letter in their mailbox. The message was simple. You are currently residing on private land without legal ownership. You may purchase your property rights at current market value. Failure to do so within 30 days will result in eviction proceedings. I didn't write it with malice. I wrote it with precision.
I had learned that from them.
See, they taught me what happens when you follow rules made by people who think the rules don't apply to them. They taught me how to speak in legalese, how to send cold letters in warm envelopes, and how to smile while turning someone's life upside down. Now it was their turn to read between the lines. The reaction was like dominoes in a hurricane. Some homeowners packed up immediately, knowing they couldn't afford the buyout. Others tried to negotiate, plead, even threaten. But the answer was always the same. Market value. Take it or leave it. I watched as for sale signs popped up overnight, some handwritten in desperation. But no one was buying, not with pending lawsuits, revoked insurance, and news coverage that had dubbed Oakwood Hills the neighborhood that shouldn't exist. Then came the one I'd been waiting for, Daniel Whitmore. He didn't knock on my door. He didn't call ahead. He just showed up in a moving truck, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. His designer shoes kicked up dust from my driveway as he loaded boxes into the back of the truck he once wouldn't be caught dead in. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Some sympathetic, most silent. I stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed. He looked up at me, face drained of its usual smugness. No more slick suits. No more HOA president strut. Just a man stripped of power, standing on the very dirt he once tried to claim as his. Well, Daniel, I said, nodding toward the horizon, welcome to justice. He didn't reply. What could he say? Oops, my bad for forging land deeds and building an empire on someone else's inheritance? I watched as the truck rolled away, wobbling slightly on the gravel. Daniel never looked back. And that was fine. I didn't need him to. Within weeks, bulldozers came, not to erase my history, but to rebuild my legacy. The southern fields were cleared for a local farmer's market, complete with fresh produce, crafts, and food trucks. On the western end, a distribution center for small-scale agriculture went up, jobs for the town, growth for the region. And the rest? It became farmland again.
Wide.
Open.
Honest.
Exactly what it was always meant to be. They called me a villain on the news. Said I destroyed a community out of spite. But what they didn't say was how that community was built on lies. How it crushed voices like mine for years with fines and forms and fences. What I did wasn't vengeance. It was restoration. They took my peace. I took their pavement. And now, standing on my porch, boots covered in real dirt, not HOA-approved mulch, I watched the land breathe again. Oakwood Hills was gone. But my land and my family's name was more alive than ever. Silence doesn't make you innocent. It makes you complicit. That's what I was thinking as the knock came on my door one quiet Tuesday morning. It wasn't the usual angry voice or desperate plea. This time it was soft, hesitant, almost ashamed. I opened the door to see Jessica Monroe, one of the model residents of Oakwood Hills. Always polished, always smiling, the kind of neighbor who waved but never looked too long. The kind of woman who wore HOA colors to HOA meetings and nodded when Daniel Whitmore spoke like he was reciting gospel. But today, she didn't look polished. Her eyes were red, her hair unkempt. In her arms, she clutched a folder full of papers that no longer meant anything: mortgage statements, tax bills, HOA certificates. She stood there for a long moment before she spoke. "Mr. Johnson," she said, voice trembling, I know I was part of the problem." I didn't interrupt. I wanted to hear the truth from someone who had spent years pretending not to see mine. I always knew what they were doing to you wasn't right. The fines, the letters, the way they treated you like you didn't belong. I didn't say anything. I was scared. I didn't want to make enemies with the HOA. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it. She just looked at me, desperate, exposed.
Please.
I have 2 kids. They love this house. This neighborhood is all they've ever known.
Just give me a chance to stay. I'll pay.
I'll find a way. Just don't take this from them. Her voice cracked on the word them. I looked at her, really looked, and for a split second, I saw a human being who understood what it felt like to lose control. To be at the mercy of people who smile while taking everything from you. But that moment passed. Because what she saw as mercy, I knew as history. And history doesn't forgive silence. I remembered the day I came to the HOA office, hat in hand, asking for just a little understanding. Asking them to ease up on the dust complaints, to give me time to fix the old fence, to stop citing me for unapproved tractor storage. Jessica had been in the room that day, sitting quietly just like always. She never spoke up. Not when they laughed. Not when they called me a relic from the past. Not when they voted to fine me $200 for planting sunflowers too close to the fence. So I took a step forward, meeting her eyes. "You knew," I said. "You watched what they did to me. You watched them bleed me with their rules, and you said nothing. Now you want compassion." But all I ever got was a notice in the mail. She lowered her head, whispering, "I'm sorry." I shook mine, slowly.
Firmly.
"You know the rules, Jessica. I'm just doing exactly what you all taught me to do." I turned and walked back inside, leaving her standing there, still, silent, small. Not everyone threw stones, but no one built a shield either. And in this town, silence had a price. They called it community. But what they really built was a wall of convenience, hiding behind bylaws and backroom votes, while people like me were crushed under their civility. And now, that wall had come down. One name, one eviction, one regret at a time. The wind was different now. Not softer, not louder, just honest. I stood on my porch, the same boards my father nailed down with sunburned hands, and looked out at a horizon that was once under threat. It was mine again, not because a judge said so, not because I won some legal chess match, but because truth doesn't need permission to exist. Oakwood Hills was gone. Not in theory, not on paper.
Gone.
The neat rows of beige houses had been emptied, foreclosed, bulldozed. Their little ornamental street lamps? Torn out like weeds. The playground where HOA board members once held community picnics while mocking the dusty old farmer next door? Now flattened, cleared for a seasonal pumpkin patch. And the sign, God, the sign. The one that used to read, "Welcome to Oakwood Hills, a planned community." It had been ripped out weeks ago. All that remained were 2 rusted steel posts jutting out of the earth like broken ribs. A perfect metaphor. Hollow. Pointless.
Dead.
There were no more letters in my mailbox. No more fines for growing unauthorized vegetation. No more smiling tyrants in pastel polos knocking on my door with fake concern and real contempt. Just quiet.
And sky. And wheat. And me.
Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I hadn't picked up that phone. If I'd ignored Sam's call. If I'd just let it all go. But then I think about that forged signature. That fake smile on Daniel's face when he thought he'd won. The way they paved over my family's legacy like it was just some empty lot.
No.
Letting it go was never an option. I wasn't just fighting for land. I was fighting for every man who's been told to sit down and shut up. For every family that's been pushed aside by official policy. For every voice drowned out by polished legalese and well-trimmed lawns. They thought I was just a farmer. But they forgot something. They thought I only had land. I whispered to the breeze. But I had history. And history doesn't disappear because someone files the wrong form. The wind answered with silence. The good kind. I looked out over the fields. Crops swaying like ocean waves. The market stalls being set up down by the road. Local kids stacking produce, not HOA regulations. Trucks from nearby towns pulling in with fresh soil and new dreams. This was community. Real community. Not one enforced by fines and fences, but built with dirt, sweat, and the unshakable stubbornness of people who refuse to be erased. A hawk circled above, riding the air like it owned it. Good. Let it have the sky. I had the ground. Inside, an old photo of my father hung above the mantel, him leaning on a shovel, smiling like the earth itself had told him a secret. I raised my coffee mug toward him. We did it, Pop. And so the farmer stayed. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because this place was never theirs to take. And now, it never would be again. The end.